I'll start again. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third quarter meeting of the New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. It is now 10:05 a.m. on 9/16. We'll start, as we always do, with a quorum call. Kevin, if you'll run through the roll, please.
Matt Tebow.
I'm present.
Ben Keller.
Present.
Joseph Palazzola.
Present.
Vincent Rappaciullo. Keith Wen.
Here.
Joseph DeStefano.
Present.
Claudia Bramer.
Present.
Joseph Toomey.
Present.
Sean Hamlin.
Present.
Timothy DeRuscher.
Present.
Robert Hughes.
Present.
William Tyne.
Here.
Patrick Dolan.
Here.
Dominic Marinelli.
Here.
13. And I will check one more time. Vincent Rappaciullo is logged in as a attendee. I'm going to promote him to a panelist now. Vincent Rappaciullo, are you here?
I'm here now, yes.
Very good. All members present.
Great. All members are present, so we'll move to our first order of business. That is announcements. The first thing to do is to thank Dave Seeley. Dave shortly ago resigned his position as the town supervisor in the town of Arundecoy and has moved on to a job in private business. So we wish him well and thank him for his service. But unfortunately, by operation of law, we lose him in our midst. So anyway, thank you to Dave for all the work he did in the two and a half years he was on this council. It was greatly appreciated. Now I'll jump to Kevin. He's going to go through this hybrid way we are conducting meetings, at least for this meeting and then December. Then we'll see what happens after that. Kevin.
Thanks, Matt. Pursuant to Chapter 417 of the laws of 2021, this meeting will be held remotely by WebEx conference call. The law indicates the public shall have the ability to view or listen to the proceeding, and the meeting shall be recorded and later transcribed. As a result, today's meeting is being held via WebEx instead of a public meeting open for the public to attend in person. But the public was provided access to register to attend the call, and then a call-in number was provided so that any interested members of the public can listen to the proceedings. Additionally, the meeting is being recorded and will later be transcribed. Because of these special features, we ask that each Code Council member record their vote individually, both for establishing quorum and for individual items as needed. At this time, everyone's microphone has been muted. Any Code Council member, panelist, or division staff wishing to speak, remember to unmute your microphone, state your full name, then speak. Anyone from the public wishing to address the Code Council should send a message through WebEx to either me or my co-host, Chad Severs. We will then collect some information such as your name, address, as necessary, and who you're representing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 2, which is the draft minutes of June 25th, 2021. These were sent to you last week, and I believe they've been posted since several weeks after the meeting in draft form. So my first question is, does anyone have any amendments that need to be made to the draft minutes? Okay, hearing none. Then we take this up, as always, as a voice vote, as currently drafted. All in favor of adopting the minutes of June 25th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Abstain, I wasn't
Any
present.
What's that?
Tim DeRuscher.
Tim, that's right. Okay. Any opposed? Okay. Draft minutes of June 25th are adopted unanimously with the notation that Tim DeRuscher is abstaining because he was not present. Thank you, Tim.
This is for Bill Tyne.
Same for Keith Wen.
Bill Tyne. Keith Wen.
Same for Pat Dolan.
That's Keith Okay. For doing the math in my head, we still have enough to carry, so the motion carries with 10 members. Moving to agenda item number 3. Now, this is a little different than we've done in the past, so Kevin's going to do a lot of talking here, and we'll have Peniota on the side if we need her. So this is agenda item number 3, more restrictive local energy code filings, energy law, section 11-109. All right, Kevin, why don't you do the intro, and then you can kick us to Chris, and we'll go from there.
All right, the first thing I want to do is just go over quickly, because we do have agenda item 3 and 4 that do address more restrictive local standards in some fashion, but a difference between the energy law and the executive law. So energy law section 11-109 provides that any municipality which adopts a local energy conservation construction code shall file a copy of such code and any amendments or revisions thereof with the code council within 30 days after promulgation or adoption of such local code or any amendments or revisions thereof. If the municipality files such copy within such 30-day time frame, the municipality may enforce such local code amendment or revision until and unless the code council shall determine that such local code amendment or revision is not more restrictive than the state energy code. If the municipality fails to file such copy within the 30-day time period, the municipality may not enforce such local code amendment or revision until and unless the code council shall determine that the local code amendment or revision is more restrictive than the state energy code. With respect to an energy code filing, the code council only needs to determine whether such local energy codes are either more or less stringent than the state energy code. With respect to the uniform code, Executive Law Section 379 provides that the legislative body of any local government may duly enact or adopt local laws or ordinances imposing higher or more restrictive standards for construction within the jurisdiction of such local government that are applicable generally to such local government in the uniform code. Within 30 days of such enactment or adoption, the chief executive officer, or if there be none, the chairman of the legislative body of the such local government, shall so notify the code council and shall petition the code council for a determination of whether such local laws or ordinances are more stringent than the standards for construction applicable generally to such local government in the uniform code. Such local laws or ordinances shall take full force and effect upon an affirmative determination by the code council. The code council shall adopt such standards in whole or in part if the code council finds that such higher or more restrictive standards are reasonably necessary because of special conditions prevailing within the local government, that such standards conform with accepted engineering and fire prevention practices, and that such standards conform with the purposes of Article 18 of the Executive Law. Generally, Agenda Item 3 will address energy code filings received pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 for more stringent local energy codes than the state energy code. And Agenda Item 4 will address notice and petitions received pursuant to Executive Law Section 379 for more restrictive standards for construction than the Uniform Code. You'll note that 2 municipalities have filed both an energy code filing pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 and a notice and petition pursuant to Executive Law Section 379.
Okay,
Which will be
Kevin,
discussed in Agenda Item 4.
before you go on, does any code council member have any questions about the procedural process and the basis for where we are? I know that was a lot in a very short period, so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is there any way that Dominic can mute himself? Oh, he just did. Never mind.
Yep, I just saw that chat, and Dominic, I did just mute you, so at any point, if you would like to speak, just remember to unmute yourself.
Okay, hearing none. Kevin, if you want to continue.
Okay. So specific to Agenda Item number 3, many of the local energy code filings received pursuant to Energy Law Section 11-109 are based on NYSERDA's New York Stretch. We have here today Chris Scroy from NYSERDA to make a presentation on NYSERDA's current work related to New York Stretch and to remind the Code Council about the stringency of New York Stretch as it relates to the state energy code. So go ahead, Chris, whenever you're ready.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Kevin, I have a brief PowerPoint. Doesn't look like I have the ability to share it, though, so I think you have to grant me that.
All right, you should be the presenter now.
Thanks. Hopefully everybody can see my slides. I just have a brief slide deck. So thank you for that introduction. My name is, as mentioned, my name is Chris Scroy. I'm a senior project manager with NYSERDA's Codes, Products, and Standards team. I think also on the line from NYSERDA are Chris Corcoran, who is the program manager and team lead for the Codes, Products, and Standards team, as well as John Lee, who is a senior advisor on the team. So thank you again for the opportunity to present today. I'll just be giving a brief update on where things stand with New York Stretch Energy Code 2020 and its local adoption. So just by way of providing a bit of a refresher, New York Stretch 2020 it's a more restrictive supplement to the state energy code. It's not intended, it does not replace the state energy code, but amends it with, it amends certain provisions and adds new provisions to both the residential and commercial chapters of the state energy code, as well as to ASHRAE 90.1 2016, which is obviously incorporated into the state energy code by reference. NYSERDA developed New York Stretch with the intent for it to be a roughly one cycle stretch, and with the intent to prime markets and jurisdictions that adopt it for future statewide energy code changes or potential future statewide energy code changes and building performance levels. And we see New York Stretch 2020 and potential future iterations of New York Stretch as being in support of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act goals, and specifically as a building block toward potential decarbonization of buildings through codes. We developed New York Stretch through a public-private stakeholder process. We had two committees, one for residential chapters of the code, one for the commercial chapters. And it's worth noting that those committees included staff from the Division of Building Standards and Codes. Relative to the State Energy Code, New York Stretch 2020, the New York Stretch 2020 supplement represents a nearly 20% increase in efficiency in residential new construction, and roughly a 7% increase in commercial new construction. And again, that is relative to the State Energy Code baseline. NYSERDA performed cost effectiveness analysis through consultants, which is published today. There are two publications, one specific to the commercial portion of New York Stretch, one to the residential portion of New York Stretch. We plan on making some revisions to that cost effectiveness analysis, which we expect to publish in Q4 of 2021. And those revisions will illustrate how New York Stretch's efficacy is impacted if a local government adopts New York Stretch omitting one or more provisions. And I believe Kevin will speak a bit more to that later in his remarks. And then additionally, NYSERDA currently, and through, at this point, December 31st, 2021, is incentivizing local adoption of New York Stretch 2020 through the Clean Energy Communities program, which is a NYSERDA program available to municipalities today. And so, as mentioned, that opportunity, at least for New York, incentivizing New York Stretch adoption, expires at the end of this year. But it has spurred interest in New York Stretch adoption. There are several local governments that have adopted to date, and many additional local governments that are considering adoption. So that's kind of a bit of background on New York Stretch to date, where we see New York Stretch 2020 going in the future is through a revision to New York Stretch 2020, something we're calling New York Stretch 2020 version 2.0. The current iteration, which we have published today, was published in July 2019. My former colleague, Marilyn Dare, who is now retired, presented to the Code Council at its July 2020 meeting, and she went through New York Stretch as it's published today in greater detail, going through it, the cost effectiveness analysis, payback, etc. So we are planning on publishing an update. We are currently working closely with the Division of Building Standards and Code staff to finalize those revisions. And as well, have been working with the team of consultants that were directly involved and responsible for the development of New York Stretch 2020 version 1.0. We intend to publish version 2.0 as a single volume book overlaying the Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State 2020 through the ICC, so that municipalities that adopt New York Stretch or those that are interested in learning more about New York Stretch will be able to just reference a single document rather than, as was the case with the 2016 State Energy Code supplement. Anybody using New York Stretch would have to have the supplement in one hand and their code book in the other. This would combine everything into one book. So that is something we're working toward with the ICC and as well as Department of State. The version 2 revisions do not change the supplement's intent, and it's not expected to change at all its overall efficacy. Just at a high level, the revisions that we intend to publish fall into the following general categories. First being updates to any references that define basically like the scope and intent of the document, and that it is a supplement to the State Energy Code, the 2020 version of the State Energy Code. It will also include errata to the ICC 2018 that has been published by the ICC since version 1 of New York Stretch 2020 was finalized. We also intend to update heating and cooling efficiency tables in the commercial chapters of both the State Energy Code as well as ASHRAE 90.1 2016 to reflect current federal appliance standards. We also plan to revise the structure of New York Stretch references as they apply to ASHRAE 90.1 2016 compliance paths to make anybody using those compliance paths or to make using those compliance paths a bit simpler. So structural changes there. So that's a general overview. Like I said, we are working closely with Division of Building Standards and Code staff to get this finalized, and we do expect to finalize it in Q4 of 2021. And those are the end of my remarks. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we'll pause there and see if any council members have any questions specifically for Serta.
This is Sean Hamlin. I have a question.
Sure, Sean.
Your stretch, is it exclusive to heating and cooling equipment?
New York Stretch makes amendments to essentially all building systems to lesser and greater degrees. So there are envelope amendments, there are lighting amendments, etc.
I guess I was just curious about any issues regarding the envelope.
When you say issues,
Not issues, but I mean, did you address increase efficiency to the envelope of the building?
yes, there are some envelope related changes that do increase the efficiency of the prescriptive, R and R value new factor tables.
Okay.
This is Robert. I believe NYSERDA has a very good comparison breakdown, which would be very helpful. Separates the residential and commercial. Give a very good overview as far as the specific changes.
Yes, we do. We have, so NYSERDA has on our website, there's a page, a sub-page for our team, the Codes, Products, and Standards team that is dedicated to New York Stretch. On that page, and this is something that we share with every municipality that's interested in adopting New York Stretch. But it includes a toolkit of a number of resources, including that comparison document, which is a roughly 8-page document going through the residential and commercial amendments that New York Stretch makes to the State Energy Code. There's also published there the residential cost effectiveness analysis, the commercial cost effectiveness analysis, and an adoption guide to help support local adoption, as well as a model resolution, and then obviously a link to download New York Stretch 2020 as well.
I don't have a question necessarily, but just a couple of comments. One is thank you for the presentation and the update. And also, as to your last point, I do appreciate that there's the model resolution language. But that brings, when I went through our agenda packet today and looked at all the towns, there were very many different versions of how these towns were, or municipalities were submitting the resolutions to the Code Council. So I think maybe a little bit more outreach to the municipalities to make sure that they are adopting the model resolution, or that they're doing it carefully so that there aren't any problems when they come to the Code Council. That also brings me to my second point is, how much do we want to leave this to the discretion of the municipalities to adopt? I'd like this council to seriously consider whether or not we want to go forward with a mandate of the New York Stretch Code, because I know I've heard often when I'm in these meetings about how important it is to have consistency across the energy code. And it seems like because of the importance of energy efficiency and that this is working, it's been done really well, and it should apply across all new construction, residential and commercial. I'm seeing that we should adopt this as a mandate going forward. Maybe that's already in the works, but I'd really like to see that be moved along as soon as possible, maybe even in our version 2.0 update. Thank you.
So just following on to what Claudia said, I was smiling at her as she was saying it. We are looking at the stretch code. We're working with NYSERDA for the next adoption, which I believe is like 2023. We're kind of targeting 2024. We're kind of targeting. So and it would be then in place of the IECC. But that's still in the works, and there's a lot to sort of work through
Piece
there.
together.
Yeah, piece together to make sure it's one joint document. Anybody else?
Yeah, Bill Tyne. So my comments are kind of in line with that, although a little bit different. I'm really trying to understand why the energy code is treated differently than the uniform code, and why it isn't part of the rest of it. I mean, the whole purpose of this council is to review the codes that come down from ICC and make sure that they are compatible with the unique characteristics and idiosyncrasies of New York State. And we review those code by code, we go through the whole thing, line item by line item, and vote on those, and then we consider more restrictive local standards and grant them if they're more restrictive and appropriate. But here, we just seem to say, it's the Wild West. Have at it, do whatever you want to do in a community. We want to incentivize you to do an end round. You don't have to go through this process. And we sort of defeat the entire purpose of a uniform code so that people know in whatever jurisdiction they go, this is the code of the state of New York. This is how you build. This is how things are done. And there was a reason why we went through this process to make it a uniform code, so that we had a better, more predictive system in place, so people knew what the rules were, so there were no questions, and it was enforced equally and uniformly across the state. But with the energy code, we just seem to say, let chaos reign, and I don't quite understand why we're in that this situation. I understand, the critical nature of climate change and there are issues, but to just ignore the whole purpose of the Code Council and why we do the things the way we do and give a whole nother section of the code complete free reign, I'm dumbfounded by it, quite frankly.
So I can jump in there, and I guess part of it is, or I guess majority of it is based on the fact that there are two separate laws. So there's the energy law, and then there's the executive law. And the requirements of the Code Council and the abilities of the Code Council are dictated right in the laws as to what is permissible, right? Whether it's, needs to be approved or not approved, or if you make a determination of less or more stringent, it comes specifically from executive law and energy law. So it's, I guess I would say, it's not necessarily the Code Council determining that's the course of action they're going to take. It's the Code Council having that authority based on the law as it's written right now.
Penio, do you want to step in there at all?
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. Kevin is absolutely true. There are two separate bodies of law, which is where we come to get our uniform code with the executive law versus our energy code with the energy law. And just to touch upon one of the other comments that were made regarding adoption of New York Stretch, keep in mind that the current requirements and restrictions that we have within the law includes a 10-year payback that we have to establish and we have to review and part of our analysis when we are adopting the energy code. So there's a little bit more to it than just picking what you want and adopting something. There's legislative restrictions and requirements that we have to comply with when we do review updating code provisions. So yes, having the uniform code and the energy code, we usually take them up in kind together when we do updates, but they are separate laws and we have to comply with both of the separate laws.
I get that. I guess I'm questioning the wisdom of the two different laws. And I know that's above our pay grade, but I think it still needs to be put out there.
I agree. I think that maybe needs to be some legislative push if the energy law doesn't allow us to make this consistent across the board.
Bill, I understand the frustration. I do. You're right. It is above our pay grade, way above mine. So, we hope that, and Claudia, with regard to the legislature, we hope that the legislature does sort of clear the way there and allow us to move forward there. Okay. Anybody else have questions for Chris or discussion on this topic? Okay.
I just want to make sure that my comment about the updating the guidance doesn't get lost in the weeds of that other discussion, because I think it is important that we, coming from an elected perspective and making sure the municipalities do adopt whatever they're supposed to adopt correctly, that outreach and the update to the guidance specifically, to make sure it references this is a supplement and not something that they can change any of the language. Thank you.
Understood, Claudia, and Kevin and his team work very close with NYSERDA, and I know they do a ton of outreach.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, I think in the amount of sort of what's hitting NYSERDA right now, there are some who are not contacting them, and so the positive outreach is very important, but also very difficult. I have a feeling. I don't want to put words in Chris's mouth, but I think we're the right where they're at right now.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, why don't we thank Chris for his for his presentation and jump right into the number of petitions and applications and filings in front of us.
Yes, and I will ask Chris for a PDF copy of his presentation, and I can get that to the co-council members so they can have a copy of that.
Yes, please.
Okay, so currently, 12 local energy codes have been filed with the division on behalf of the council, and I'll present them in 4 separate groups. The first 5 filings require no action by the co-council pursuant to Energy Law, Section 11-109. The town of Bedford was previously presented to the Code Council and found to be more stringent, but the town has updated the language of their local law to more clearly identify the types of construction the local energy code applies to for better alignment with the NYSERDA guidance. The stringency of their local law remains unaffected. The city of New Rochelle, town of Dryden, town of Ossining, and the town of Marbletown have all adopted New York Stretch without modification. Additionally, all 5 of these municipalities submitted their local law within 30 days of adoption. Therefore, as noted previously and discussed, they can enforce their local law until and unless the Code Council determines the local laws are not more restrictive than the state energy code. Based on the July 2020 presentation and today's presentation by NYSERDA, and based on them having submitted within the 30-day time frame, these local laws filed are more restrictive than the state energy code, and no action is necessary by the Code Council to permit these municipalities to enforce these local laws. Representatives from the town of Bedford and the town of Ossining are here today to answer any specific questions the Code Council may have in regards to their specific local energy code. So I'll pause there and see if any of the Code Council members had any specific questions, being that Bedford and Ossining are present. Okay. Hearing none. The second group, the division has also received filings of local energy code from the town of Newfield and the village of Athens. However, the town and village have severed a requirement for a heat recovery ventilator and an energy recovery ventilator. As mentioned and discussed by Chris Roy from NYSERDA, NYSERDA is going to work with their consultants to review the impacts, if any, to the stringency analysis as a result of severing provisions. Once NYSERDA has provided this updated information, the division will be able to recommend to the Code Council what, if any, action is necessary. The Village of Athens submitted their filing after 30 days of adoption and therefore cannot enforce their local law until and unless the Code Council makes a determination that the local law is more restrictive than the state energy code.
So that one will be back likely in December.
So I think the plan in discussing it with NYSERDA would be to be able to bring those 2 back in December, and the village would require the Code Council to make an action in order for them to enforce their local law.
Understood.
Third, the Village of Montour Falls local law appears to have adopted New York Stretch as a replacement of the state energy code and not as a supplement. As noted in the presentation by NYSERDA, New York Stretch is intended to be a supplement to the state energy code, meaning that the provisions within New York Stretch replace or amend specific provisions of the state energy code, and the remainder of the state energy code is applicable. The stringency analysis provided by NYSERDA assumes the remaining provisions remain in effect. By replacing the state energy code with New York Stretch rather than supplementing the state energy code with New York Stretch, only the provisions of New York Stretch would be applicable within the village, and numerous baseline requirements of the state energy code would not be in effect, and the stringency analysis performed by NYSERDA and their consultants would not apply. The department has reached out to the village attorney on several occasions to discuss the received filing, but has received no response. Additionally, the division informed the village that their filing would be on the agenda for today's meeting, and of the division's intent to recommend to the Code Council that they find their local law to be not more restrictive than the energy code. We did not receive a response, and to my knowledge, no one is here from the village to speak today. Accordingly, because the village appears to have adopted New York Stretch as a standalone energy code and not as a supplement, and as a result, numerous baseline provisions of the state energy code would not be applicable in the village, the division recommends the Code Council find, pursuant to Energy Law, Section 11-109, that local law number 1 of 2021 is not more restrictive than the state energy code. And I'll pause there for a moment to see if the village did in fact attend. If you wanted to chat in and let me know. And I don't see anything.
Okay. Before you move on, let's see if any of the members have questions on that one, and then I'm going to ask Penny Oda whether she thinks we should just take up that, because that is the vote that we would have to take, or whether she wants to wait until the end. So, do the Code Council members have any questions there about Montour Falls? I know you all received that in your packets and you've read it, but just want to throw it out there. Do you have any questions for Kevin and the team? Okay. All right, hearing none. Penny Oda, do we take up the motion now?
Yes, I believe at this point we would do a motion for the one municipality, the village of Montour Falls, because they did file within the 30 days so that they can, in fact, enforce it unless and until the Code Council does find that it is, in fact, not more stringent.
Okay. So I will make that motion through you. Maybe you'll make that. No, I'll make that motion through you. That's right. And you go ahead and read it, and then we'll see if we get a second and go from there.
All right, for your consideration, on February 18th, 2021, the village of Montour Falls, the village, adopted local law number 1 of 2021, which amended chapter 62 of the Village of Montour Falls Code, the Village Code, by amending the definition of energy code to replace the State Energy Conservation Construction Code with the New York Stretch Energy Code 2020, New York Stretch, published by NYSERDA. The local law was filed with the Department of State Records Unit pursuant to the Municipal Home Rule Law on March 1st, 2021. On March 19th, 2021, less than 30 days after the adoption of Local Law number 1 of 2021, the village filed a copy of Local Law number 1 of 2021 with the Department of State for the Code Council's review pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law. On July 10th, 2020, NYSERDA presented to the Code Council a report indicating that New York Stretch, which modifies certain provisions of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Construction Code and ASHRAE 90.1-2016, is more restrictive than the currently effective version of the New York State Energy Code. New York Stretch is not intended to be utilized as a standalone publication, but as an overlay to the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and ASHRAE 90.1-2016. The Village of Montour Falls Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law number 1 of 2021, as written, does not appear to adopt New York Stretch as an overlay, but replaces the New York State Energy Code with New York Stretch, and therefore does not provide the same level of energy efficiency in all circumstances as provided in the New York State Energy Code. I move that the Code Council determine, pursuant to Subdivision 2 of Section 11-109 of the Energy Law, that the Village of Montour Falls Local Energy Conservation Construction Code, as amended by Local Law number 1 of 2021, is less restrictive than the currently effective version of the New York State Energy Code. So moved.
Okay, as previously noted, I make that motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Joe Toomey seconds the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, in that case, I'm going to ask Kevin to call the roll, please.
Matt Tebow.
I vote yes.
Ben Keller.
Yes.
Joseph Palazzola.
Yes.
Vincent Rappuccillo.
Yes.
Keith Wen.
Yes.
Joseph DeStefano.
Yes.
Claudia Bramer.
Yes.
Joseph Toomey.
Yes.
Sean Hamlin.
Yes.
Timothy DeRocher.
Yes.
Robert Hughes.
Yes.
William Tyne.
Yes.
Patrick Dolan.
Yes.
Dominic Marinelli.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. I'm going to ask Kevin to communicate the decision of the council back to the village. I'm going to ask Kevin, and I will also ask NYSERDA to try and work with the village to, I guess it would be pass a new local law at this point that is a supplement and therefore reaches the stringency standards required in this case. Hopefully, we will see Montauk Falls back here in December or in March. All right, thank you. Kevin, back to you for the fourth group.
All right, the fourth and last group includes 4 additional municipalities: City and Town of Ithaca, Town of Bethel, and City of Kingston. These municipalities have also filed local energy codes with the division on behalf of the Co-Council. At this time, however, these municipalities have requested additional time to supplement their filings with additional information before they are formally presented to the Co-Council. The City and Town of Ithaca both include a green building code. The Town of Bethel and the City of Kingston have adopted New York Stretch, but have also filed a related notice and petition to the Uniform Code pursuant to Executive Law Section 379, which will be discussed again briefly in agenda item number 4. The division has been in discussions with NYSERDA to determine potential crossovers of New York Stretch with the Uniform Code in order to be prepared to review the notices and petitions when the municipalities provide the additional information. The division has also been in contact directly with every municipality who submitted a filing pursuant to Energy Law, Section 11-109, to coordinate with NYSERDA in relation to any potential crossover of New York Stretch with the Uniform Code, so that they are aware of the 2 processes under each law. Ultimately, it is the municipality's responsibility to determine if they need to file a notice of petition to the Uniform Code or submit a filing of a local energy code. A municipality should consult with their municipal attorneys regarding Executive Law Section 379 and Energy Law Section 11-109.
Okay, so we might see them back in December as well. So you can see a pretty busy December meeting shaping up already. All right, Kevin, if there's no more discussion, hearing none, we'll move to agenda item number 4, more restrictive local standards, Uniform Code, Executive Law Section 379.
The division has currently received 3 notices and petitions on behalf of the Co-Council pursuant to Executive Law Section 379. As discussed previously, the Town of Bethel and the City of Kingston have simultaneously submitted a local energy code filing and a notice of petition to the Uniform Code for their adoption of New York Stretch. However, both municipalities have not specifically identified the requirements within their local law that constitute more restrictive construction provisions necessitating a notice and petition. The municipalities have requested additional time to provide supplemental information to the division and the Co-Council before the division performs a review of their filing and/or the notices and petitions. As stated previously, the division has been in discussion with NYSERDA to determine the potential crossover of New York Stretch with the Uniform Code in order to be prepared to review the notices and petitions with the municipalities when the municipalities provide this additional information. No analysis has been performed by the division pending the additional information being submitted, and no action is recommended by the Co-Council at this time. The Village of Elmsford submitted a notice and petition of a local law which requires automatic sprinkler systems be installed in certain buildings and during certain renovation projects. During an initial cursory review with the village initially requested that the division postpone formally presenting the notice and petition to the Co-Council until the village had additional time to provide any necessary supplemental information. The village has since indicated they have provided everything they plan to and would like the notice and petition to be reviewed by the division and formally presented to the Co-Council. The division will work over the next couple of months to perform a detailed analysis of the notice and petition and provide a recommendation to the Co-Council at a future meeting, likely in December. So no action is recommended on this agenda item at this time.
So Kevin, am I correct in saying at this point that everything that we had previously or that was received since our last meeting is on this list that we might have to take action on in the future?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so this is our list right now. I hesitate to ask because I don't know if Chris would even have the answer, but are there others in the queue that we know might be coming?
So I think it's fair to, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Sorry.
Okay. I think it's fair to expect that there will be additional filings coming, yes. I can't give you an exact sense of the numbers, but we're probably talking like single digits.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Okay, there's no more discussion there. We will move to agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5, Surfside, Florida, the building collapse. So I'll open this, I'll start it, and then Kevin will jump in here, and John as well. I guess it's John, right? Yeah. Okay, so the day before our last meeting, a terrible tragedy occurred. About 98 people passed away in a building collapse in sunny side, Florida. I want to get that right. Like I said, a terrible tragedy, and still one that's under investigation. We immediately, as a department, got our hands dirty. We assigned staff to start looking at this because obviously we wouldn't want something like this to happen in New York State. There are a lot of issues here. I think John will unpack them for us, so I won't go there. I will note for the council, and I believe they were sent to you, that we've received now several letters, a letter and then a follow-up from Senator Kaminsky on behalf of 3 different senators, asking us to take whatever action is necessary to make sure that this can't happen in New York. So that, with that as a beginning, I'm gonna kick it to John. I'm gonna say that John was asked by the ICC to join in their group. They held a task force just north of Miami about a month ago to discuss the issues. So I'm going to kick it to John. He's going to tell us about that and sort of open up what I would hope is a broad discussion among the members. Go ahead, John.
Nope, we can't hear you, John.
I did that. I did it again. Sorry. Thanks, Chair Tebow and co-council members. So on August 17th, I had the benefit of attending an in-person panel discussion held by the International Code Council and the National Institute of Building Science. The panel discussion was hosted by the Building Officials Association of Florida in wake of the Surfside, Florida building collapse. Discussion focused on how communities monitor the safety of existing buildings and what guidance exists for building owners and how future events can be avoided. So organizations represented at the meeting included the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now, this is the agency that is taking the lead on investigating why the building collapsed. They're also working on a report once they have their findings. And what was interesting, the director attended, the one that's heading it, and also they use the same techniques and procedures that the National Traffic Safety Board uses. So also in attendance was the National Institute of Building Science, the National Council of Structural Engineers Association, Florida Building Commission, Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, Department of Defense, BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association International, and National Apartment Association. Also in attendance were individuals and organizations representing state agencies, attorneys, architects, engineers, real estate professionals, just to name a few. What I found interesting was that there was an engineer there that worked on the legislation that Dade County has now in place for recertification from 1974. So he provided some insight and background on the requirements as they exist now. Again, subject matter shared their knowledge and recommendations on how communities monitor the safety of existing buildings. So just as background, Miami-Dade County, where the Surfside collapse was, has requirements in place that requires a 40-year recertification. They call it certification. There was some confusion there. I guess the term certification maybe in 74 was appropriate, but I think there was some confusion about it meant that they were bringing the building up to current code, which is not the case. It's basically I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's basically what we would consider maybe an assessment. So just keep that in mind. And then exempt from the requirements are single family homes, duplexes, and all of the buildings with an occupant load of 10 or less and less than 2,000 square foot. So each municipality within the county is responsible for the recertification process. So the building owners in which the have a building that's 40 or more years old are required to have the building inspected for the purpose of determining the general structural condition of the building and the general condition of the electrical systems. So it's just structural and electrical systems that need to be inspected at that 40-year time frame. So in accordance with the code, the building owner must submit a written certification report to the building official prepared by the Florida registered design professional, either an engineer or architect, certifying that each building structure is structurally safe and electrically safe for the specified use of the occupancy. So Broward County, Florida had similar provisions. So there were 3 panels at the discussion during the day, and there was the codes and existing buildings panel, which covered structural safety and property maintenance. The panel discussed the current building codes and standards that relate to structural safety, existing building code and property maintenance code. There was a building inspections panel that discussed the current process for building inspections, guidelines for frequency, technologies for enhanced building inspections for the future. And the panel discussed the current process for building inspections, including current guidelines for frequency and how they are performed. And then the last panel was the property maintenance and real estate industry panel, which spoke to the overall systems and inspections, operations, and maintenance of buildings. The panel discussed the roles and responsibility of building owners regarding building safety in existing buildings and best practice for maintaining safety for occupants regarding inspections, codes, and standards. So in summary, I think, and this was even mentioned on the onset, there is a need to wait for the final report for the NIST report to be released to determine the cause of the collapse. So obviously, I think we all know that it could be design issues, construction issues, material issues, code issues, maintenance issues, or any combination of those. So obviously, I think we all need to learn as much as we can from this event and a final wait till the final report before making any code changes or recommendations as far as perspective from Florida. So that's end of my report on that. So thank you.
Thanks, John. So let me first open it up and let's see if there's any discussion from Code Council members about the topic.
Yes,
Okay.
I have a question. Is there any requirement? I understand in the Florida situation that there was an inspection that was done, and that the homeowners association ignored the engineer's recommendation that certain repairs had to be undertaken. Is there any requirement in our code where if an engineer who's licensed by the state recognizes some type of structural deficiency, that they have a reporting requirement to the municipality? So they're not just speaking to the person who's paying them, that almost like a mandatory reporting.
This was discussed, and I believe through state ed, who is the regulatory agency for design professionals. I think they do have a responsibility to report if they see something that is an issue for a building. I believe they need to report that.
John, report that to who?
It would be the code department. I mean, obviously, if it's an unsafe structure, the code department for the AHJ would need to be notified. I think it's a responsibility of the design professional to do that.
This is Robert. Just have a question. The required recertification or certification after the 40 years, is that required to be filed with the local municipality?
Yes, it is. And I don't, one of the issues that came up was that condominiums, they obviously have to report that the board makes the decisions, and that they seem to be, that was one of the problems. They got that report. And my understanding was that they were at some point going to do major updates to the building, but didn't, because it was never passed by the board. So, yeah.
John, did you get any sense while you were down there about what issues that you named are the likely culprit here? I mean, in New York we have a very interesting setup. We have a code that is created by this council through a very robust process, taking in the ICC documents, reviewing, adding, subtracting, making quote unquote New York changes, and then out the door, usually between 3 and 4 years. And then we have an enforcement process that is handled on the department side by the division. So there's a lot of different ways that if something needed to be done, it could be done, right? We might have to make changes to the code. We might have to make changes to the enforcement regulations. We might have to do both. We might not have to do anything. But I just want to try and give the council a sense of where you think this might be going. I know that's putting you on the spot, and I know that people are being very careful, and they really want, I think you said in your notes back to me that, everyone down there was speaking with one voice, that, no one should rush to judgment and wait for the final report to come out. But did you get any sense while you were down there, or is that really the party line? Everyone should just wait because we really don't know what happened.
No, keep in mind that it's coming from a county that already has the assessment. I'll call it assessment requirement, certification requirement. So they have that. So they've kind of put a little bit more emphasis on that, for lack of a better term. So they now are, if they don't get that report, they consider the building unsafe. So I'm assuming they're taking whatever actions they need to do to say, okay, we didn't get that report. Now the building is unsafe. So they would not, so that's how they would treat it. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Matt. I mean, you have to take it from their perspective that they have this assessment in place.
And John, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what does that assessment include? I mean, what type of testing is done by the engineer? They
have specific instructions on how to do that. I know that I've been looking at the Broward County, information. They have a lot of information online, and they've got specific things. So if you start seeing something and it looks like there's a potential problem, that you need to dig deeper, and to see if there's actually structural issues. So it really depends. But at least at that 40-year mark, you're going out there. One of the things they talked about was having better maintenance records for the buildings, requiring that as part of it. So when you go out there, you look, has the building been maintained? Obviously, we all know maintenance it means a lot. I mean, if you don't maintain your car or anything like that, even your house, it constantly needs to be done. So that's a big thing. But yes, I think at that 40-year mark, and they're looking at maybe it should be 35 or 30 years. And they talked about that as well. So when I say they, I mean the building, the county representatives in the building departments.
Yeah. So, John, I'm just going to dovetail off of the senator's letter a little bit. I believe he mentioned in his letter, thoughts about, does this have anything to do with the saline or salt in the air because it was so close to the seaside? Obviously, New York has a lot of these type of buildings, New York City and the surrounding counties that are in that sort of scenario. Does it have anything to do with the height of the building? I believe he said something over 6 stories. So did you get any sense when you were down there that those could be the issues involved, and that a subset of buildings might need to be tested, examined, certified because of something like that?
Yeah, yes, definitely. That there was a lot of discussion on that. So you would group buildings based on the location, the risk categories based on the IBC, the environmental climate influences, areas subject to frequent flooding. All those things would have potentially a higher priority than other types of facilities. But yes, definitely, that's a critical piece.
Obviously, I never want to move away from the uniform code, but we do have situations right within the code right now where certain usually geographical areas are treated differently, right? We have wind zones, on Long Island. We have climate zones. I think 4, 5, 5A, and 6 within the state. So there is that opportunity as well, right?
Yes, and I'll just add. I know ICC is obviously being a big help to Dade County and Broward County in Florida in general. They are actually developing a appendix for the kind of an added document. And maybe we can. I know a little bit about it, but I know Dottie has been helping them with that. So I don't know. It basically touches upon exactly what you're saying, man. So I don't know, Dottie, can you add anything in on the appendix? Are you there?
She unmute herself.
Yes, I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, it's absolutely fine. And hello, Chairman and members of the board, and thank you, Director. Yes, we've been very involved, and I have to say I've been asked to actually add Florida so I'm going to be covering New York and Florida, which selfishly, New York is very important to me, so I'll be able to really give you a lifeline of everything that's happening in a very timely period. So we've been working very closely with the Florida Building Commission, which is similar to the Code Council, and they have an adoption, process very similar. They don't use a statewide property maintenance code the way New York does. So that is something that, of course, is a recommendation. There are jurisdictions that have a property maintenance code. Some is the International Property Maintenance Code. Some is, an outdated form of the property maintenance code when we had legacy codes. So that's something that is a recommendation. And we have developed a Florida specific draft, which would be an appendix of the property maintenance code that deals directly, as what John was saying, levels of inspection, so that there would be a maintenance inspection, then following a periodic inspection, and then a milestone inspection, which would deal much more about that, as John mentioned, recertification aspect. So we are working with them. We have a draft. I did share that with John so that he, I want him to be, of course, in every loop that we're in, and to see what's going to happen. But they're certainly looking at, as John mentioned, is the 40-year a good amount? What is the level of inspection that happens? And should there be inspections prior to that? Maybe a general walkthrough, and I have to say, New York has a lot of requirements where, our code enforcement entities are in the buildings. So, that's something I think it's safe to say that Florida, just like every jurisdiction, is always looking to how others are doing things. So if there is a good case study, that's why it was so critical, John, being there to just be able to meet some of those counterparts and share information. And we are looking at doing more of a national forum as well that we will do in a virtual way, knowing that a lot of people couldn't travel to Florida. We have a lot of states that are very interested in what's happening. So I'll be sure to share that information when we have it. And hopefully, as time goes by, I know the NIST report probably won't be out for a few years, but we will be able to still continue to learn some of the whys and the hows, and maybe a good, best practice. So I will continue, of course, to keep everyone in the loop. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Dottie. Dottie, let me jump in there. So before Dottie goes away, quick question, Dottie, and this is sort of our overarching, and I know I'm putting you on the spot when I do it.
No problem.
This was a terrible tragedy. 98 people lost their lives. I don't sleep very well at night thinking about that, right? Is this something that you believe that is something we're going to see a lot more of? Is it possible that it can happen in New York? Or was this a one-off situation that likely came because of some external factor?
You know, it's such a, and I know just what you're saying, because, we're asking ourselves the same question. I think it's safe to say that, the codes work for what it is they're supposed to do. We learned even from this last hurricane that new construction has fared very well. Each disaster that's happened, we learn from that. The federal government, FEMA now incorporates into whether they're going to provide reimbursement to local governments. Is a local government, is the state government or jurisdiction, I should say, using the most recent version of the code, and they're defining in their regulations recent version as the code that's out. So right now the 2021s are out, and they're counting it the 2018. So recent version, they're counting 2. So those jurisdictions that are using outdated codes may not receive the federal funding that other jurisdictions that are using more up-to-date codes, because they finally, realized, I guess, they've incorporated codes as part of mitigation efforts. There's no better mitigation. So, what we're seeing is that does work. This was a building that was constructed in the 80s. Coastal climate, I'm certainly not an engineer, but I know, the salt content, the sand, so New York is different. Certainly we have, the beach climate and things like that in Long Island. So I think it's something we should look at. These are high-rise construction buildings. As John mentioned too, that third panel that talked about property managers, they had some very robust property managers that, explain that, they do, very good reporting. You have condo associations that don't retain a formal property manager who's trained and certified and things like that. And then not to mention the fact that the building owner does have the right to provide some of this information or not. So, it is kind of, taking us from the code realm to probably the legal realm when it comes to that property management aspect. But I think that's why it's so critical that we do involve all these stakeholders and have everybody at the table, kind of, as a model of what you do as the code council. You have those stakeholders represented, and that's why it's so important to have the design community, the builders, contractors, everybody really sitting there, as well as all the local government officials. So Florida is trying to do that now. We've been participating in the mayor's task force that she has, and as well as the Florida Building Commission, and then they actually have a task force from the commission which deals with hurricane, and so we're participating in that as well. So the guideline that we've kind of, or I should say the draft appendix that we put together as for Florida is more specific to Florida. Our goal is to also create a generic type document that'll still have to, of course, go through the code development process. So there at least is a guideline for jurisdictions that does comply with the property maintenance code. And again, an appendix is certainly up to the jurisdiction to adopt. They have to formally make that decision, just as you have. There's appendices that New York adopts. There's some they don't adopt because it's just not relevant. But at least there would be some type of uniform guideline, nationwide, that jurisdictions would at least have if they so choose. So that's the goal. But like I said, I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time in Florida now, and so now I'm kind of going to be doing the New York, Florida route. So I'm happy that I'll make sure that anything I'm hearing, you're hearing.
Appreciate that, Dottie.
Of course.
So before I shut myself down here, I'm going to pull out something you said there, and that building was built in the 1980s, right? So it was built under one of the first real uniform building codes. Where are we getting? Got it. Okay. It was built under one of the first real building codes. So, obviously it was probably not built to the standards that we're seeing in the 2015, 2018, and 2021, and soon 2024 versions of the International Building Code. So, that in the game of three-dimensional chess that we're now sort of being asked to play, that is interesting because we have to take into account that as well, and maybe that kicks us back to the enforcement realm. Anyway, I know that Claudia has been waiting.
No, that's good. I think it's a good discussion. And I understand what I think I'm hearing about New York being much different than.
Sorry, I'm gonna mute you just while Claudia's talking, and then if you have something to say, you can jump back in. Thank you.
And the fact that we have strong property maintenance codes and that we are doing those inspections of older buildings, and that's pretty robust. I also think that those inspections can probably be improved, especially when I'm reading the letter that we received from the senators, as well as Senator Kaminsky's response back to us. I think that we do need to take a harder look at requiring some sort of periodic inspections of the structural integrity of the buildings, not just the outside visual inspection of the property itself and how that is being maintained. But it'd be really great, Dottie, if maybe you could provide us recommendations, or I know you're obviously working on that from Florida's perspective, but it sounds like they're in a different situation than us. So that would be nice to have, and I'm sure the Code Council, everyone here is working on it as well.
Robert?
Yes. I'd just like to say, as a code enforcement official, I agree. Building codes absolutely help. But what's important is the follow-up, the enforcement. Because you can write any code, but if it's not properly enforced, then it wouldn't matter. Condemning a building prior to a disaster never goes over well in a municipality. It's very difficult enforcement. I would just like to see maybe there's a push on education for inspectors, staffing, local municipalities. That's the part that's really helpful. It's quite difficult. Do everything that's asked of a code enforcement official, and I think the majority do want to do the job. Obviously, there's a lot out there that need help and need education and need to be, helped out as far as them really doing the job correctly. We're not perfect, but I think the enforcement part and the follow-up is way more as important as the code itself. The code helps after the fact in court, but we really don't want to see these disasters happen at all, and that's the only way you get that done is the follow-up.
Thank you, Robert. I agree. Any other Code Council members? Tim, looks like you're raising your hand.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Tim DeRusher speaking. And there's a lot of stakeholders in this, and we obviously have to wait to get the proper information. But in review of the various letters going back and forth and the discussions here, it's extremely important, I believe, for us as a body to recognize that structural integrity is a very, very detail-oriented type of analysis, and there's many things that go into that. So it's extremely important for us to recognize the need for, probably has done so in Florida and many other places. I'm sure the city of New York has their facade requirements, but the use of a registered design professional rather than putting that onus onto or intending that to be placed on any kind of inspectors, because the level of competency and the details and the expertise is substantially different. So just like we've done with the parking garage as referenced in that letter, that's an item that needs to be there, and this body should make sure that whatever we do going forward, that's something that's a registered design professional in structural engineering, not somebody that's going to do something else. So that's just a statement. We'll see what happens going forward, but we need to include that.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Sean. I appreciated your comment, Matthew. The dementia. Just from our standpoint, or my standpoint as a designer, problems or challenges with buildings, or this case may very well be a design failure or an execution or construction failure. And one of the more valuable provisions in the code that I've seen over the years is the requirements for special testing. That is insurance that what is being is actually in the field. Those variances are variances that perhaps from anything from concrete mixes to the actual type of weld on steel, those variations occur. And sometimes they're human error, or other times, quite frankly, there may be a contractor saving a couple of cents or an incompetent designer. But those are also things that are in the mix that I think we as a board need to be aware of.
Thanks, Sean. It was excellent detail. I really appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, I think we can probably close down this agenda item. I think before we do, though, and I'm going to apologize to some of my council members who have been on a task force for about the better part of 18 months at this point, I think. But I think it might be a good idea for us to put together another working group and to look at this issue. If for no other reason, then, I think the senator and I will sleep a lot better at night after we really dig into this a lot deeper. So I think it makes sense if they are so willing to ask Tim, Robert, Bill, Sean. I think we can work with HCR as needed, but I don't know if we necessarily have to put them on this working group. And I would open it up to any of the elected officials who have an interest here and really want to join in. Obviously, we can't go to 9 because that would be a quorum of this body. So there are a couple of spots there open for any of the members who would like to join. You don't need to commit right now. We can talk to you after the fact. So I'm seeing some shaking of heads from the names that I just threw out there, and it seems like that's what we will do. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I would also respectfully ask Mr. Wen for some input, because I know the city has had a number of different situations where they've had similar type of circumstances or underneath different types of buildings or facades that do require that we might be able to get quite a bit of good insight from them.
Agreed, Tim. Keith, I won't put you on the spot right now. We'll come back to you after the meeting and talk that through.
Yeah, we can talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Okay, that concludes agenda item number 5. Moving to agenda item 6. John and Dario to give us a director's update about the comings and goings of the division beyond what we've seen so far today. Stretching a small staff very far these days, John.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Matt. Just quick, a little bit about training. We have been in the past, and at this meeting, we've been providing credit, code enforcement credit for attending. Anybody that attends a co-council meeting, we will be discontinuing that. We kind of reevaluated it, looked, and we really need to be fair and consistent when approving courses. So for several reasons, we will, after this meeting, we'll no longer be providing that credit. Some of the things we've run into is, the meeting, this meeting obviously is long enough. But also applying the topic area to approving courses based on the regulations. That becomes difficult depending on what's going to be discussed, and we that makes it difficult. And then also, it's not really consistent with the policies and the regulations for approving courses. So we will be discontinuing that. Also on the training topic, we've actually been delivering the basic training courses for the initial certification for code enforcement officials virtually since May 2020. And last year, 400 code enforcement officials completed their training online. This year, we're on track to certify over 600 code enforcement officials, which is a huge increase over last year. In 2019, we did 350. So Doing it virtually, I think has been really working. So we will continue that. It may end up being a blended learning. But we could have never hit these numbers doing it face to face, and it actually allows it's easier for code enforcement officials to attend without having to travel. And we're not just certifying more code enforcement officials, but we're certifying them much faster. There used to be a wait time of 2 to 3 months to get into the training, into the basic training. Under the current program, students are certified within about 4 months. So just note some of the things we've actually done change it so that there's 1 week of training, 1 week off, and it continues until they get the 6 courses. So on those off weeks, training is assigning homework to the students. So it's a little more intensive and a little more demanding on the students. So I think that's a big success for our training unit, and they've done a great, amazing job on that. So just to note that. Regarding regulations, Part 1203, the public comment period ended in July. We're finalizing the assessment of the public comments, and we'll be filing a notice of adoption fairly soon. We've made some minor changes. Nothing substantial. So once we file that notice of adoption, we're going to do a effective 1 or 1.5 years after we file the notice of adoption to give local governments the opportunity to update their local laws to reflect the changes. So regarding the 2021 code review, staff is continuing to review the changes to the 21 codes, right, as we speak, and how substantial they are. So we're looking at the changes. What's the impact to what are the big changes from the 18 that we're on now? So we are looking at that. And then last time I spoke a little bit about the Climate Action Council. They are finalizing their scoping plan, which includes the building, and we talked about some of that stuff earlier with the stretch code and things that kind of meet that goal. One of the big items are essentially the same as what I spoke on before. There is a push to adopt things sooner, and I think I mentioned last time Claudia, you mentioned about the stretch code statewide. There is the barrier there is that 10-year payback in the energy law. So that there needs to be some sort of legislative change to make that allow the code council to adopt the stretch code. And again, the stretch code is an overlay on the IECC. So we're looking at the 2021, the intent, and NYSERDA would be looking at the 2021 with the stretch code modifications to be incorporated in the next version of the stretch code. So again, next week's the ICC hearings. I believe we've got 12 code change proposals that are going to be heard, or at least part of that agenda. We submitted 5 or 6 public comments. So we will be discussing those at the hearings next week. And then, Dottie, do you have anything on the hearings you want to add on the ICC aspect?
No, I was going to say just that they're webcast, so anybody can watch them. It is a great way to learn the whys and the hows of how code changes originated and how the next provisions originated. The order will be, they'll start on Tuesday, and they'll start with the plumbing, mechanical, and fuel gas codes, and then they'll move into the fire code, and then the property maintenance code, and some of the committees on the building code. And I'm glad you'll be there.
Yes. That's all I have.
Okay.
Unless there's questions.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John. Before anybody else asks questions, if anyone else has questions, I'll just note, you noted that staff is already looking at the 2021 version. I would note that actually our 2020 New York is already a blended code in a lot of ways. We picked up a number of important features when the 2021 was still in development, even though we were working on the 18. So we're already pretty far down the road there with regard to where we stand.
Correct.
Live code. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
Any questions from the council for John? Okay, hearing none, we'll close agenda item 6, jump to agenda item 7, which says work group update. Now that we have 2 work groups, we'll call this the fire safety work group update. We'll kick it to Kevin. Sounds like you're coming down the home stretch there.
Yes, so making some great progress. We met 2 times since the last code council meeting, and we were able to complete all of the topics, at least the initial pass through of all the topics. And we've drafted the summary appendices, I guess is what they will be likely in the final report. And we've drafted the executive summary, the intro to the executive summary. So our next pass in the October and November meeting will be the main body of the executive summary and the attachment of the appendices. And still on track to hopefully get something to the co-council members. My plan would be sometime in November so that they have time to digest it by the time the December meeting happens. And I'll run through the topics that we've been discussing quickly. We've got Fire Code Section 903.2.11.3 for a sprinkler pipe at 55 height versus 30 foot of height. Heat detection and alarm connection for multiple station smoke alarms for attached garages versus a 45-minute separation. Deletion of emergency responder radio coverage in existing buildings. Deletion of mobile fueling operations. Deletion of several exceptions in ICC language about fire partitions when they are and are not required. Changes to fire command center sizing charts. Updating to the current sprinkler standards for NFPA 13, 13R, 13D, 14, 20, 24, and 72, and updating to the 2019 versions as opposed to the current ones currently incorporated into the code. Townhouse sprinkler systems, sprinkler provisions for new bed and breakfasts, the use of 10-year battery backups and smoke detectors, interconnection of new smoke alarms using wireless technology, updating reference standard NFPA 72 and to the 7th edition of UL 217 and the 8th edition of UL 268, and lastly the performance code.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank the members, obviously, for the work that they've done. It's been a long haul, and I'm looking forward to the final report. Hopefully, when Kevin gets back from his next couple of weeks, he can push that forward, and we can get it to the members with enough time to have a robust discussion in December, and then figure out how we move forward with those at that point. Are there any questions for Kevin? Okay. Hearing none. We'll close agenda 7. We'll jump to agenda 8, which is the public comment period. Kevin, do you have anyone on the list? Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak and address the council today?
So I did not have anybody previously signed up, and I'll monitor the chat for a moment to see if anyone chimes in.
We'll leave it open for a minute here because of the way we're doing business online. Nothing? Okey doke. We'll close the public comment period for this meeting. Jump to agenda 9. That's the future meetings. I'll remind the members that currently for 2021 we have a meeting on December 3rd. That'll be the 4th quarter meeting for this year. For 2022, we have kind of finalized these dates. We haven't heard a lot of negatives on them, so it's looking like March 4th, June 24th, September 23rd, and December 9th of 2022. And it's funny to talk about a date that's 15 months in the future. But I want to give you guys the time to get those on your calendars, just in case. And again, if any of those dates don't work for members, please let Kevin know. Also, I will note, because the senator asked me, and so I'll throw it out there, we can always have an extraordinary meeting. It doesn't have to be a quarterly meeting. We can always have an extraordinary meeting at the call of the chair if required business comes up. So just throwing that out there as well. We would obviously check in with you for dates that work. That closes agenda 9. Agenda 10, other business. Is there any other business to come before the council today? Okay, hearing none. I don't have anything else. Kevin, Peniota, anything else? Nope and nope. Okay. Well, in that case, by voice vote, I'll move that we adjourn the meeting, the third quarter meeting of the New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council until December 3rd.
So
All in
moved.
favor, say aye.
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 Wonderful. Any opposed? Anyone want to keep going? No? Okay. We are adjourned at 11:36. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you in December.